Buongiorno a tutti. Siamo pronti per iniziare questa mattina con Dina, Kamal, Shehayeb. Non so se ho pronunciato bene, Dina, scusa il tuo cognome. Dina, you can hear English with a button on the top. Can you see there is you can hear in Italian or in English? It's okay for you? Can you? Dina, can you hear me? Yes.
I couldn't hear you for a while.
You hear me in English or in Italian?
No, I couldn't hear you. I was hearing the interpreter, and then there was silence. So I didn't hear you in Italian.
Okay, because I'm speaking in English. Ma se io parlo in italiano, mi senti la traduzione in inglese? Sì? Mi confermi? Posso
Do you need me to confirm?
Sì, confermi che senti la traduzione in inglese?
Yes, I am.
Perfetto.
I can hear you in English.
Ottimo.
Thank you.
Quindi benvenuta, ti ringrazio molto di essere con noi per questa scuola questo nostro appuntamento con la scuola sulle Smart City. Il primo anno che sei con noi, mi fa molto piacere che tu abbia avuto modo di darci il tuo contributo, fare la tua presentazione. Dina è un architetto molto...
It's my pleasure.
Un architetto molto...
It's my pleasure.
Grazie ancora. Un architetto molto impegnato, oltretutto direttore alla Nile University del programma di architettura e urban design, quindi ci darà una prospettiva sulle smart city chiaramente di tipo più architettonico e anche urbanistico in qualche modo. Quindi ti lascio subito la parola e ti ringrazio ancora di essere con noi.
Thank you, Luigi, for the introduction. Thank you for the interpretation. I am, I think, sharing my screen. I don't know, can you confirm that you can see my screen?
Ancora no.
Can everybody see my screen? The
no,
presentation?
Devi fare come prima, devi condividere con il tasto in basso.
Oh, okay, let me do that. Yes, I did. Okay. And here it is.
Perfetto. Ora sì.
Can you see it now?
Sì.
Yes.
Sì. Okay. Thank you, Luigi, for inviting me. It's an exciting topic. It's very hot. I think all over the world, we have aspirations, excitement, and fears. And I will share some of mine with you, with some examples from Egypt. But I think I'm asking all participants, I don't know your nationalities. I'm sure you're not only from Cagliari and Italy. And if you've traveled also abroad, if you've lived in different spaces, try to just reflect on similarities in different contexts. Okay, the big question, can smart cities deliver a better life for all? Also, before I start, I would like to ask the interpreter, please, absolutely no problem if I am too fast in English for the interpretation, please let me know. Just interrupt me simply. Okay? I have no problem. I know interpretation is very, very challenging. So thank you. As Luigi introduced, I'm currently the program director of an architecture and urban design program in Nile University in Egypt. It was founded through an Erasmus Plus project, co-funded by the European Commission, and the University of Cagliari was a partner, which is something that I'm very fortunate. And through that, I got to meet Luigi when I came to Cagliari in 2018 in preparation for this program. We're currently in year 4. We still have year 5 to go because we are a 5-year undergraduate bachelor program. And I have my private consultancy firm, Shehayeb Consult, since 1998. I'm also, my career was in a national research center for housing and building before joining the university full-time. Okay. Now, this is just the abstract that I sent, but this is the start here. Just a few definitions. I'm sure there are other speakers who spoke more eloquently, elaborately about smart cities, but these are the definitions that I'm interested in. They're supposed to be an integration of physical, digital, and human systems to deliver prosperity, inclusiveness, and sustainability. Okay, very good slogans. It is also an urban area. It has a physical representation, a scope, a geography that uses electronic data collection mainly, located in diverse infrastructures, vehicles, buildings, open spaces, and so on, to supply real-time information. And this should be helping city governance to operate those systems. It allows the city managers decision-making. So from data collection, we are jumping to prediction and accordingly informed decision-making, usually also through remote systems as well. It's also used to communicate with stakeholders, everyone in the city, supposedly. And there are always claims that or assumptions that there is participatory governance and that smart cities will increase the collaboration among the different stakeholders, and that it would do some matchmaking and encourage the private sector, the public sector to partner and grow creatively. It's aiming at competitive, attractive, business and creative environment. Okay, I have some classic references here. So this is the formal definition. Now, the prediction part, we're gathering a lot of data. Of course, computer science and big data specialists are involved in that. Just to give you, just to retrospect that this started quite a long time ago, 1989, with e-services. Okay, and the diagram on the right is from the reference that I have cited at the bottom. And it states just a little bit of the e-services that kept growing over the years, starting 1889. There was great dependence on machine learning algorithms from the data that is gathered to identify supposedly hidden patterns and therefore can do projections and predictions. Of course, urban planning has always been based on future projection and predictions, but this machine learning using artificial intelligence was a new tool to be used for more informed projections and predictions. The domains where it was used are listed on the left: healthcare, transportation, of course, education, crime detection. When we talk sustainable environment, it's very successful in disaster detection. It's transportation, we've seen it implemented in many ways. Healthcare data about percentages of people healing from something and so on, and practices within healthcare institutions was very successful. Smart building, smart agriculture and livestock systems that have to be managed with at grand scale, city scale. Smart building is heard of now, and it was not about gadgets that move curtains and so on, but rather links to infrastructure, including security and safety and policing and elderly care who live alone, emergencies, and so on. Again, there are a lot of successes there. Tourism, culture, and services and entertainment is about a lot of applications now that are interconnected, telling us about, like we started on the internet reviews, about places, where to go, where not to go, concerns about safety in tourism and in defense. Okay, so that sounded great. And then the threats that we see very often in movies are actually real threats. And there are different kinds of system attacks. And specialists of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and IT in general are very taken in working on safeguarding against anyone who can do any blurred data, transform data, confuse the system. Of course, there are ways to detect those, but again, the threat is there, and there is a lot of work put on the security of data, the authenticity of data. Having said that, there's another challenge. So we talked about the benefits, but there are challenges that are at the ethical level, like privacy. It's a big concern, even when we're talking about the COVID-19 vaccine. So there are concerns about the privacy, about now we have to get informed consent for everything, but do we really read everything that we say I accept when we click a button on an application? There's so much of it now that if we really truly give time to read all this, I don't think we will use half of what we're using. How shared is the data? Of course, even social media, there are concerns about that. Interpretation of data is another challenge. I mean, the data is mostly statistically converted, even if it's qualitative data. It's always coded into quantitative measures because these are the ones that can show quick indications for decision making. And so interpretation is a big issue here. And I will come back to this because it reminds me very much of when we were discussing quantitative and qualitative research methods and the strength of statistics and the weakness of statistics vis-a-vis qualitative research. Until now, quantitative is always seen as more powerful, more reliable than the qualitative measures, whereas we can also look at it that the assumptions of the interpretation are made at different times of the process. So for quantitative research methods, we assume a lot at the beginning when we sample, and when we choose the statistical inferential methods. In the qualitative, there is a lot of naturalistic inquiry at the beginning. We're very true to what we are researching, but then we have the assumptions, the interpretations at the end, after collecting the data, or after the process of analysis. There is no one method better than the other. And so, as far as I'm concerned, as a researcher for over 30 years, I think we have to use both and not rely and not overstate the predictable or the informative or explanatory power of statistics, which I think is happening now because of the rush and the speed we need to make decisions and move on, and the size of the data. So these are some challenges that were brought up by those authors. There are authors away from smart cities, just in the field of artificial intelligence. There are concerns that say it has to be more human. and more human compatible. And let's move away from business models. In the first definition I shared, we saw a very clear business model that cities will be competitive, innovative, prosperous. It's not bad, but the city is not a commodity. The city has a social obligation towards everyone in it. And it seems that the business models don't have room for more than what is directly tied to economic growth, prosperity, and hardly asks who this prosperity is being distributed on. So we always have this debate about social justice, equity, inclusiveness, and so on. And it's still going on. Now, this researcher brought up also something more specific, more general than smart cities, just the use of IT. And it said that it had an effect of sometimes polarization, extremism, misinformation, and internet addiction. And I won't go through the evidence of his discussions, but this is something that maybe the age group of teenagers and youth in their 20s are living it. There is a big challenge for them to have this information overload and jumping short-term concentration, as well as the challenge of distinguishing between the authenticity and the credibility of the information they are reading on the internet. So there's always this doubt. Now, the dimensions to consider were summarized by Ben Green, saying that, okay, we're all concerned about well-being, livability, prosperity, social justice. And we have to be very cautious and not run along with a technical view of urban life, which will lead to cities that look smart on the surface, but could be very unjust and suffer inequality within. So his recommendation was use it in junction with other forms of social change and not to value technology as an end in itself, which unfortunately is happening in countries, particularly countries like, I'll have to use the term developing countries just to, I don't like the global south, and all these have connotations and are weighed by preconceptions, but it's a fact that there are trendsetters in the global scene, like Germany maybe, and there are followers. And Egypt, in this case, is one of the followers. We are not producing the new knowledge. We are just understanding it, learning it, adapting it sometimes, and implementing it with a lot of foreign expertise. And so we're a very fertile market for those who are producing the trends. Okay. The fears that Green brought as an example was that if we do synchronized mobility, it will push out pedestrians who have more choice, the individual personal choice. Civic engagement will be limited to services that have apps and to those who can use those apps and have the infrastructure to use it and the mindset to use it. The algorithm to justify and perpetuate preconceived practices. Like any design, if we look in the underlayers, there are values. Even the global human rights are based on underlying belief systems. And we cannot deny, because this is the nature of the human being, we cannot say that they do not exist. They do exist, except they are, by choice, agreed upon by many people on this planet. So we shouldn't forget these underlying values that themselves design the algorithms and their aims. Then there is this issue of control. To what extent would we control people's behavior? This is a big fear. Okay, so now there are prospects and people who reacted to this and said there is the human smart city, conceived as an ecosystem where the physical and digital infrastructure coexist with the human capital of the city. And that people should be really at the center and seek an integration and never lose the physical potential of people physically dealing with each other outside this system. Now, this is a bright thought, but hardly operationalized into how to do it. The UN Habitat, this is a quote from Ms. Maimouna, Executive Director of UN Habitat Settlements Program, where she says, we have to have resilient and inclusive cities and communities. And I would quote a colleague from Cagliari, Ivan Blecic, who when he was in our winter school, February 2020 in Nile University, he was talking about anti-fragility as a substitute for resilience. Very interesting concept. Anyways, the UN Habitat has a website. I have it here. You can check it out. It's trying it has a flagship program where it tries playful and easy to use for lay people tools to be able to participate and have a voice. And this is usually with local governments. Okay, to what extent these tools have been successful? I mean, I was evaluating the public space program of UN Habitat that was running since 2012. And there are successes, but there are also failures. And they were using Minecraft as a tool to let people participate in the design of a public space. And if you don't ask the right questions or choose the right people, or I don't want to say the right people, but I will come back to participation and its challenges. But it's not as simplistic as the way it's been handled by UN Habitat. At least I can say that. Okay, the aims of UN Habitat are very noble: empowering the community, attend human rights, people's needs, maximize participation, have affordable internet, manage the data and have security for it, build trust by securing the digital assets, and multi-stakeholder capacity building. Now, I have a little bit of concerns here, and I will raise them to you, that if we empower people, we have seen that with the gender agenda, gender sensitive, gender planning, gender budgeting, empowering women in many societies has led to adverse, non-predicted consequences. I know for sure in the Arab world and in Egypt. So empowerment should be across the board. It shouldn't be empowerment of certain groups. Be careful, because if an entire society is oppressed, if you empower one group, it will do damage to the others. So do we always have the non-empowered? I think we do. And the other issue of empowerment is time. We empower a group at a certain point in time. It's like participation. You participate with some people to do a lakefront project, waterfront in Baltimore, beautiful project. But what about future generations where the area of the city where we conducted participation and solutions is done? So is there room for participation to go on? This is always an issue, the time issue. Another one is that we can't say affordability of internet only. It is complex, and it is very hard for urban planners. They understand that it's very hard not to have disparity in infrastructure. Managing the data. I think that the responsible managing of data is like when you have an overpass over a crossing. You just move the traffic problem from one spot to the other. It was in the traffic light intersection, and you've moved it a little bit further up and down the road sometimes. So this is a chronic problem, and the New Urban Agenda, I was part of the expert groups dealing with certain parts of the New Urban Agenda before 2016. And there was a really a scream across the board from developed and developing countries all over the world about the fragmentation and the miscoordination between sectors of government and sector ministries. And this is in France and in Belgium and in many countries, in Italy, in France. They were there. They were represented in this group. So it's not something that was only an issue for the developing world. It was also in the developed world. The layers of laws and regulations over time. Sometimes there are inconsistencies. I mean, this complex system of managing governance, the legal system, the governance and implementation system, and the social justice system cannot be simplified in saying just be responsible in managing the data. Trust. What about when you have shortage of trust in certain countries? Shortage of trust between the governing group and the governed group because of history of mismatching aims, goals, and narrow perspectives to mitigation plans, impacts, and so on. So I think trust is not just trust in a small scale where we say, let's go work with local government and we build trust around a certain project. It's a one point in time and disappears. The multi-stakeholder capacity building takes time, whereas the tempo with decision making is always so much faster. Okay, so undiscussed in this discourse that I found in the literature is when we have hidden patterns, informal systems, living heritage, things that are not seen to be monitored and measured by sensors. We have changing lifestyles between generations, especially in countries that are in transition, like countries that haven't had the same lifestyle for a long time. So there is a faster change of lifestyles between generations and between decades now. The speed we are living in now of change has unprecedented in history. This post-COVID, will it end? Will there be other things? There is another life and another lifestyle emerging after that. Work from home, work from parks. We were discussing that in last summer in a conference of IAPS. Since we work from home, why should we go to, and if it's a nice sunny day in a grim cold city, can't I work outside in the park and have the infrastructure, the internet, and do my work in different places, measure my productivity? So all the measures, the criteria of measuring success, growth, productivity, prosperity, environmental quality, they are all subject to value systems. Anyways, then there are the pitfalls of participation. I will show you some examples. As I told you, you participate at one point in time. What about after that? What about other groups? The quantitative versus qualitative I mentioned. So now I would like to stop and show you some examples of what I talked about in Egypt's current state. So we have here new cities. We are going through the fourth generation of new cities that started in the 70s. And the fourth generation, of course, is smart and with this technology base for that. But the physical layouts and planning of segregatory land uses and car-oriented or road-oriented, let's say, maybe it's not car, maybe it would be, now there is a monorail being designed for the new capital in Cairo. The services are never enough. The public transport is not complete. Even if we do a monorail to the capital city, we don't have the last mile. Far from that, we don't have the step-down multimodal transportation network, which maybe Singapore is one of the cities that's quite advanced in that. But there aren't many in the world that are so well planned. So livability is low, community development, a lot of unsafe issues there. Then reality, there is a scenario that whenever we have formal design, which is not so considerate to people's daily life, people react informally. So what you see in the picture, do you see my cursor? Can you see my cursor? If I move it? The photograph in the bottom right is typical planned urban development, mostly housing.
Sì, si vede il cursore.
Okay, thank you. And it's standardized design to make it faster, less expensive, so on. Large developers, large parcels of land, and a patchwork that doesn't connect into the city that we know from history. Now, the photographs you see above, the two above and the one to the left, are all how people reacted to this planned environment. So there's a lot of informality that substituted services that weren't there. Selling fruits comes up where you have an informal stop of an informal mode of transportation, because on the way back from work you can buy something. Extensions of homes that are inappropriately planned, markets, full-fledged informal markets. So people react, and we have a series of formal, informal game. This is ongoing in many cities. I have examples from all over. This was an attempt in housing. Instead of providing the housing, of do core housing, so people can, it's a partnership, private, public, and it gives people some choice to personalize their homes. So the picture on the left is in the city of Asyut. It's actually one of the important cities of Upper Egypt, which is the south of Egypt, along the Nile Valley. It has the largest university in the south. It's a pole of research, of knowledge, of a lot of things. So they did the core housing in the 70s. But the result did not please the officials. And they say, it looks chaotic. No, we go back to provision. Mass housing, it looks very nice. It never stays like that. But again, we go back to provision. So that's an eternal story. So here are just one PhD from a colleague who was in England, an Egyptian, who said, why do we keep on doing this formal planning of the 50s? Why do we go on? It has underlying a policy of control rather than support, so it doesn't give choice. Speed, low initial cost. The professionals who are consultants, who are like me, are also have a hand in this product, because the H plan is the same since I was in 1980, my first year of architecture. It's the same. We just change a little bit in the facades, but the internal solution of the apartment building is constant, and therefore minimum thinking, maximum profit. You get the business in your consultancy form with unreasonable terms of reference of 2 months, but you do it in 3 days and you profit. So this is there. No regard for livability and livelihood. Where are they going to work? How are they going to move? It's trivial to everyone who is involved here. And no regard to long-term economics. We constantly, at the housing center where I work, we constantly discuss low-cost housing, low-cost material. You know, it's always about minimizing initial cost. Never do we talk affordable dwelling as a process long-term that people can save time, effort, and money if their resources are modest. And this is what we're teaching in the new program that I'm trying to do. My Design Studio 3 now is focused on adaptable, affordable, appropriate dwelling and neighborhood design. So there were attempts to partner communities, like, for example, the Aga Khan. I don't know if you heard about the Aga Khan Trust for Culture. They have a program of cities, and they did some interesting work in historic Cairo along the park and some monuments restoration. But it was the first time they worked with the community with matching funds. So tenants, not just owners of the properties, the tenants themselves were investing in the renovation of their modest heritage homes because there are benefits to staying there. We will see later on. This is in rural areas where we had a program between the Ministry of Planning in Egypt and UN Habitat to save agricultural land, but actually it backfired. And this is the kind of development. If you look in the middle of the picture, there is a little patch of agriculture, the green that is left. But because we readjusted the definition of the village, the rural village, readjusted its the cordon, the periphery, the legal periphery. So a lot of agricultural land became declared overnight urban land. Of course, the prices was skyrocketing 20 times the price, but the system of how it will be developed was slower than this act. So it developed again the same way the informal area grows on agricultural land, and people create their own streets. You see the streets in the picture? It's on private property. So you see the edge of the green is in the middle of the street because all these parcels were different agricultural properties back to back. There is no planning of public space and therefore no planning of anything public. Infrastructure, networks, mobility, nothing is public in the informal. The street itself is on land that was privately owned and paid for by someone. To that extent, we missed the golden opportunity. This is a well-developed, further developed suburb of Cairo, Mansheit Nasser, very known, one of the largest, 1 to 4 million inhabitants. Everything here is privately private investments, and every decade there is a public intervention in it. It's amazing. So you find some emergency housing somewhere. You find some public housing in a patch. You find there are islands of then at some point in time they decide they're going to bring in some schools and health services, but in an existing urbanism already. So it's patchwork. Now, another example, this is a district of Giza, which is the twin city of Cairo. Greater Cairo is 2 cities and part of a rural governorate. So Greater Cairo is divided administratively along 3 states, let's say, if you call a region, yani state. Giza city within the governorate of Cairo. Cairo is the capital and it's a city-state. And then Qalyubaya in the north, we are only taking part of it, which is not even the city. It's just a mush. And here you see the fabrics. You see the 1950s design of the district I live in. Then you see a black patch in the north, which was a village dating 800 years old. This was all agricultural land because the Nile is on the east here, to the right. And then you have a railroad track, and then you have the remaining agriculture of the 50s plan, which quickly turned into informal development. You can see the difference in the built form. And the informal grew on the patterns of irrigation. The village was mud brick houses, 1 story high, 2 stories maximum, and now it is 5 to 8 stories high on the same street pattern. You can imagine the density. It's one of the densest places in the Greater Cairo. This is a boulevard. I just wanted to talk about behavior and people. This is a boulevard in this new district of the 1950s. But because it is close to such diverse communities, the informal across the railroad, the village, and there are other villages nearby, and then the expensive island of Zamalek. So it has such a diversity of people around. Really, really quite amazing. So this is what you get when we win the African Football Cup. The city comes to this boulevard and celebrates. And it has people from different walks of life. This is the prayer of the Bayram feast. Around 1 million can converge in the vicinity of this area. Again, because of its connectivity to diverse populations. This is after the prayers, again in the feast, when the children would enjoy the fountains. Of course, when this happened, they landscaped again and they removed this because this was deemed as uncivilized. Okay, they haven't seen New York, they haven't seen Vienna, they haven't seen other fountains in Europe where on a hot day people can put their feet in. This was, of course, 25th of January, not after 25th of January, 2011, January 2011. Again, the same street, a major celebration. Okay, now these were special events, human behavior that comes occasionally. Today, now I'm showing you something daily event, daily life. This is from an informal area. The 2 pictures on the right, top and bottom, are inside. How people appropriate and take care and clean and light and maintain their residential streets. No police here. 1.4 million population in this district with hardly any police. The local government is only concerned with what it sees. It sees the peripheral streets. It sees the garbage on the left. The garbage on the left is along 3 main streets that define this area of 1.4 million. And this is what the government and the state sees. And this is where it calculates crime. It does not look inside. So my fears are that when we digitize and we put the sensors, we will put them only in the accessible places, and there it's so public and it's beside the railroad track. I think everybody knows that places which are at the edges of neighborhoods, very public, near continuous walls, railroad tracks, under overhead bridges, are more susceptible to negative behavior. This is worldwide, everywhere. Look at the movies we look at and the crime movies in Chicago. Where does it happen? You know, so and UN Habitat's work has proved it over and over and over again with the safety audit of women, tools, with everything. So it's reconfirmed. But this is what is visible. Okay. Sorry for the animation. I hate that. I didn't realize there is animation. So we have high sense of ownership. We have resident control and maintenance. We have safe streets and daily life. And then we have low sense of ownership on the peripheral, where we have more public. It's not public, by the way. It's mass transportation, privately owned again. And we have roads that were irrigation canals. This is another informal area where all services are provided. By the way, it's very expensive to live in informal areas because everything is private sector. And the services are upon demand. When we have ring roads, modern, so this is the ring road in Cairo. We are building a second and a third ring road, but then we don't have stops near the stairs, so people are informally building steps and informal stops of this private mass transit, which is, again, the government didn't provide it, but when it was provided by private businesses, it partnered it and it takes a fee, but it doesn't give a service. And then when you stop there, you want to drink something, you want to take a biscuit, you want to get a card to increase your mobile phone credit, for example. So you find this. So informal areas, just to give you an example, they are not chaotic. There's a lot of patterns in them. They are not, the investments in them in 97, as old as DeSoto's study, was $73 million investment. Of course, you can imagine now we have people who study the growth of the informal. Formal growth is 20% annual stock. 80% of the growth of housing stock in Egypt is informal. It's been 40 years or more. It's not inhabited by the poor. I have much more recent statistics showing a wide spectrum of who lives there. This is all, if I ask you, does this look informal to you? We are not talking river boats and shacks and makeshift homes. These are not slums by the definition of impermanent material and so on. They lack everything public, from public space, public streets, public infrastructure. So how are we going to deal with this when we say smart cities? Who lives there? Everyone and anyone. Okay, a lot of Egyptians were in the streets. Colleagues of mine in administrative positions, all the way to judges and lawyers and medical doctors. And okay, so what they are 100% self-financed, demand-driven, incremental growth, compact, low energy consuming, walkable, work-home proximity, 65% walk to their jobs, self-sufficient, and that was just a joke, even visually harmonious, because there is, they all have, the facades are not finished, so they all look red brick with some dust on it. If we look at these tenets, we see that that is exactly what we were advocating in the new urban agenda. Compactness, mixed use, all those kind of things. They are that already. We have another pattern, which again, I don't know how it will relate with the smart, the living heritage. Cairo is more than 1,000 years old as a city. And this is in historic Cairo. Thematic markets are a feature. You have craftsmen who work and live. This here, it's in UNESCO studies. You can Google them. There are 3 studies I did for the urban regeneration of historic Cairo project from 2010 to 2014. And we studied this all these in the circle on the right, these are all different workshops that collaborate at the end to give you a salon. But it's not made in China, or, you know, so these of course have a problem of competing with this global manufacturing, global trade, and slowly dying. There was a time in the 90s where we were saying we want medium and small size enterprises, loans, encouragement, what Europe lost. I was glad to see that Cagliari didn't lose the relationship to the rural, to the products, to the traditions, to the cheese. Best cheese I ever had in Cagliari. But there is a big difference between the cheese seller in the traditional, in the touristic street I was staying in, Hotel Italia, and the supermarket. Very anonymous. I didn't go back to the supermarket. The cheese was maybe the same, but the treatment was very different. And I very much liked the Italian lady who was talking to me in Italian, and I'm struggling. But she understood that I'm traveling, and she wrapped it in a certain way and wished me well, and all kinds of human things that will not be captured in the digital world. Although they are now trying, machine language is trying to capture emotions, which, okay, we will, maybe Ferdinando Fornara, an environmental psychologist, would be interested in patterns measured by machine learning. But I will come to that, saying that environmental psychology talks about universalities by age group, elderly, children, so on, pretty much all over the world, yani cross-culture, pan-cultural, as we would say. But then the anthropology will talk about the culture-specific ways of fulfilling the universal needs. Anyways, in historic Cairo, this is just one example of living, working, dealing with other workshops, praying in the middle. The workshops you work with become lifelong friends, marriage. So it's a combination. And these are the crafts that are threatened now, economically and spatially. They are seen because they work in the street in front of them, but there is no much traffic. And the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities recently has put a plan to open up streets for car access in historic Cairo, which is a medieval city, which was not car accessible. It's accessible in the periphery. It has arteries within it. Historic Cairo is not car free, but only certain streets have cars, and they are moving very slow. But then there is a lot of walkable areas which they want to open up with arteries and parking. So again, we are talking smart, and then we are talking completely unsustainable car-oriented mobility, but with a monorail that goes to the new capital. Participation, I talked to you about it. We worked with communities. I do participatory design through a model. We sit with people, we talk. It was implemented, the design, by the Aga Khan, but the Aga Khan loved the picture when it was clean and neat. Now this is how it looks. And many scholars, colleagues who send their students there tell me, did you see what happened to Aslam Square? It's horrible now. And we have to ask ourselves, what are the measures of this horrible? Okay, I will not talk. The trucks serve to move the canapé and the table from one workshop to the other. So they are on call with a mobile, and they do short distances inside the district, and they are not fast, and they don't, they don't hit anyone when they move, but they are parked in the, where there is space. Then there is the appropriation. This is a recreation of children on their way home. Could you hold on a second? أيوة يا مريم، أيوة يا مروة، أيوة دخليها من فضلك وطلعيها المكتب. طيب. Okay, I'm sorry. I think I'm running out of time, so I have to go faster. Urban transformation. There are new patterns. This is when there was no regulatory, and you have this urban transformation that is the result of laws, fragments, local government that just wants money from fines and considers them revenue. People who want to maximize the benefit of living and working in a place to the extent that they can spoil it for themselves and for their children. Large plots of heritage buildings are subdivided into 10 properties and new space is created. We've done a study to show this. How can we, these are natural transformation that needs intervention to guide them to a different output. Let's put it this way. But governments are interested in speed, and this is in Turkey. This is the lower picture is in Egypt. What we're trying to do in historic Cairo incrementally takes time, too slow. Currently, they are going to demolish a lot of this. Up here is Toki, big public sector developer, working with the government in Istanbul, greater Istanbul, but not in Turkey, not in greater, because we traveled outside Istanbul to see this. And they will move people from hill town villages, super beautiful, but because the view of the Bosphorus is so gorgeous that it can be very expensive to sell to foreigners as real estate. And we displace the village that we deem informal, so we accuse them of informality easily, and we move them to these new cities. And they could easily be digital in these new cities. So again, unfortunately, the two pictures on the left are in historic Cairo, again, where the new development, which is illegally high, but it's this densification because they like the benefits, so they bring their children in and they multiply inside the area vertically, but they are imitating what the private sector is doing in the gated communities and the large palaces, because they look at the elite and the knowledgeable. In the same time, they lose value big time, but they're unaware of it. That's another threat that's happening, another transformation. Our vision here, Cairo 2050, new digital cities, smart cities. You can see that only the high rises are what is hailed as the new, competitive, landmarks and so on, whereas the rest of the city with all its value becomes like a carpet or fields that you can do anything in. So currently this actually is a lot of elevated street networks, highways, ring roads are dissecting Greater Cairo and demolishing expensive even neighborhoods. So it's not the poor only who are suffering. The rich are suffering as well. The urban fabric of the city as we know it is being cut. It's bleeding, يعني. This was an attempt in 2011. We thought that we could link to the bottom-up movement that happened of participation and said reformulate the governing system, okay? The whole idea is that we have legislation and governance from the top, and then we have people and their practices at the bottom layer. But then the link between the legislation and governance directly to the users has always been broken and is complicated. And this is what I think Smart Cities is trying to do again. It's trying to link the government, the city officials, at a very high level, the ministries, the centralized sectors, to the user directly. We are missing the mediating factor who could be professionals who work to mediate this, NGOs who work to mediate, this mediating scale is disappearing again. We tried to have it in a certain time, but the smart cities formula, I think, goes back to the red ring, which can easily not yield, okay? Because there is no dialogue of learning and understanding, which is continuous. So I'm concluding my presentation with some reflections on smart cities. So we have the global references of modernity, of human rights, of universality. And then we have the local tradition is associated with underdevelopment, with vernacular, with poverty, with particularity of local, which currently doesn't have much value. I'm talking worldwide. I was presenting this in Spain and then in China. These come from 2013 was in Spain. Afterwards, I said some of that in Beijing. Again, we have diversity at the local, we have unity at the global, but it's a lower common denominator that we agree upon at the global level, which is the quantitative data, which is the money, which is the connectivity with roads. These are the denominators that all cultures and all faiths can speak this language. We cannot speak the language of the particulars and the diversity. And then what maybe I am drawing upon the participants in this summer school to reflect on the type of measures, the type of criteria. Why don't we go prescriptive rather than prescriptive? Again, maybe we can maintain the prescriptive and give this room for diversity. But if we get prescriptive, like the modernists, like the blueprints, these are prescriptive measures. If we design the smart cities approach on prescriptive measures, we are going back, falling into the same trap again, because there is a big difference. Prescriptive, traditionally, cities grew incrementally with codes of conduct that were more prescriptive. There were no vision of the end product. Cagliari today is the result of layers of that. It was not envisioned as a product. It had rules that differed over time, but then it grew with this. And urban design and urban planning has always been about that. But the problem is that when we turn it operational, we fall into the prescriptive, into the measurement. If you take the width of a street, two streets of the same width, built on sides of the same height, could have totally different experience in use and in function and experience completely, and measures. And if we are prescriptive, we don't capture that. If you teach neighborhood design and you say the hierarchy of streets is 30, then 20, then 10, we are missing it, meters wide. But if we say we have a main shared street, then we have a pedestrian dominant commercial spine, then we have residential streets that are actually public spaces where cars enter frugally. And we have all the biking systems, and we have the trolley again, and we have the tram. And this is a totally different approach, which is more proscriptive than prescriptive. So we shouldn't qualify the product. We shouldn't describe and aim for a product. But unfortunately, I see that in the discourse of smart cities. I'm ending with this. It's a diagram with one of my students. He was actually an undergraduate student of mine. But we're trying to see the difference. In the prescriptive scenario, the onion of culture, which I learned from my advisor, Amos Rappaport, when I was doing my PhD in the US many years ago, was that culture has culture core, which is the belief system, then values, then lifestyle, then trends that change. So change over time increases when you move from the center out. The prescriptive assumes that we are, there is uniformity in the lifestyle. So everybody on the street dress the same, conduct themselves the same, and so on. And then you have freedom of faith, which is private within the walls of your home. You do whatever you do. Okay, so, but you have to conform to a prescriptive lifestyle and behavior, which is very controlled in everyday life outside your self, the very private. Whereas the prescriptive gives, if it's based, if you have some homogeneity at the core of the values of the belief system, you can have diversity in the lifestyle, which is, I'm seeing the case of Egypt is more still on the prescriptive, although it's not planned like this. It's prescriptive by practice. Okay, I end here. Again, what I said, this unity, diversity is human nature. The universality of human needs is what environmental psychology talks about, but then it has to allow diversity in the level of manifestation. Thank you very much, and sorry for being at length. I hope that there is, I would go back to, I have to stop sharing the screen, right?
Sì, grazie.
Just a second, let me see here, and I can stop. I stopped sharing. So.
Grazie, grazie davvero per questa non direi presentazione non standard, nel senso che hai evidenziato da subito quelli che sono degli elementi di criticità che attengono il concetto delle smart city, che tendiamo a non considerare perché per lo più vengono evidenziati solo i lati positivi di questo tipo di questo concetto. Qualcuno lo considera un paradigma, io non lo considero un paradigma, lo considero più che altro una modalità poi di ragionamento. Perlomeno ad oggi ancora non è un paradigma, in quanto tanto non è condiviso completamente. Però pone una serie di problematiche approcciare le città secondo quelle che sono dinamiche che attengono l'utilizzo di nuove tecnologie, attengono l'utilizzo di sistemi che evidenziano non solo grandi vantaggi, ma anche limiti. Tutto il tema dell'identità che io trovo essere presente in tutto il tuo ragionamento e la valorizzazione dell'identità è un tema centrale, assolutamente. Non possiamo fare ragionamenti su quelle che sono le città del prossimo futuro, comunque le si voglia chiamare, se non partiamo dalla loro identità, dalla definizione e valorizzazione della loro identità, così come è chiaramente evidenziato con l'ultimo grafico. Queste identità sono molteplici. Ci sono dei valori condivisi, ma questi si poi concretizzano anche in molteplici identità e quindi dobbiamo essere capaci di coglierle, dobbiamo essere capaci di tradurle in spazi dove le persone possono vivere, esprimendo le loro diverse identità e avendo modo quindi di esprimere anche le loro potenzialità, perché poi di fatto le città non sono nient'altro che una rappresentazione delle nostre volontà, così come le istituzioni. Quindi insomma credo che tu abbia toccato tanti elementi che ci devono portare a riflettere su come approcciare in modo corretto una progettazione dello spazio urbano, che non è architettura in senso stretto, ma in senso ampio, è proprio una modalità con cui si deve vedere e si deve considerare lo spazio della città. Vedere anche che è la parte nuova, no? Quell'immagine che facevi vedere del Cairo con tutti i grattacieli sulla parte nuova e la parte vecchia lasciata, hai detto come un tappeto, no? Un po' marginale di fatto. Io l'ho trovato emblematico, cioè è un po' una perdita questa, si vuol guardare a una costruzione in qualche modo simbolica, ma che poi va a perdere elementi invece che sono centrali per lo sviluppo delle persone. Non possiamo dimenticarci cosa siamo, non possiamo tagliare le nostre radici nel nome di una modernità assoluta che poi appiattisce completamente le nostre città e le rende tutte uguali. Questo non può essere, ovviamente. Quindi io insomma, ti ringrazio veramente molto di tutti questi spunti che ci hanno fatto riflettere. Chiedo se c'è qualche intervento da parte dei nostri partecipanti. Siamo arrivati sì un po' lunghi, però se magari c'è qualche
Nessuna
domanda.
mano alzata.
Ok. Comunque ti invito, se avessi tempo, come sai, a partecipare al nostro laboratorio dove i nostri partecipanti svilupperanno i loro progetti in un momento per te comodo. Il laboratorio è ogni giorno a partire dalle 6 della ora italiana, che per te, se non sbaglio, sono le 7 di sera, che siete un'ora avanti. E il laboratorio dalle 6 alle 8 ogni giorno, e poi il venerdì tutto il giorno, scusa, il venerdì pomeriggio dalle 15 e il sabato tutto il giorno. E anche la domenica, perché poi i partecipanti dovranno presentare i loro progetti e raccontarceli. Quindi ti invito anche alla conferenza finale, ovviamente, in cui presenteranno il loro lavoro. Se non ci sono, non vedo domande, quindi ti ringrazio ancora. Do appuntamento a tutti alle 13. Avremo altri 2 incontri. Se anche tu avessi modo, mi farebbe piacere che tu potessi essere con noi anche nelle prossime occasioni. Ti ringrazio davvero tanto di questa tua lezione.
Thank you, Luigi. Thank you for the interpretation. It was a pleasure sharing some of the thoughts. I know I talk all over the place, but I'm looking forward to looking at the students, at the participants' work, 7 to 9 on my Cairo time. And I will write to you to see when would be appropriate. And in the weekend, of course, is possible. But Sunday, unfortunately, I have my design studio from 8:30 in the morning to 8 o'clock in the evening. It's a killer. But I hope that what we ended on, the proscriptive, is important, because we tend to fall into the prescriptive image of what it looks like, and this is where we can lose the human part. And there's a lot about Cagliari's character. I mean, it's a lovely place. I would we'll talk about it another time. Okay, thank you, Luigi. Thank you all. Have a good lunch break and see you another time. Bye bye.
Grazie ancora, grazie Dina. A presto.
Bye. How do I want to leave. How do I end? Yes. I'm trying to end the meeting.
In alto a destra c'è una freccia.
Can you end it from your end? Because I'm not finding the button where I say end meeting. You have been removed from this session.
Ok. Di nuovo grazie a tutti. Ci vediamo più tardi.